Hello and welcome to this video on the contrast connector for Kenna's vulnerability management platform. During this video we're going to be looking at what this integration provides and talk you through in steps involved in setting up the connector. The contrast connector for Kenna allows you to export vulnerabilities from either custom code or libraries into your Kenna platform. The connector can be run on a frequent basis to ensure that your reporting in Kenna is always up to date with the data from Contrast. Once this vulnerability data is transferred, it can then be viewed alongside other sources of security data, such as a network scanner or firewall. The vulnerability data is also augmented by Kenna's own security feeds to show you additional risk insights, such as whether vulnerabilities can be exploited by malware or are involved in data breaches. Let's start by having a look at how you can obtain the connector. The contrast connector is included as part of the Kenna Data Importer or KDI. The KDI is essentially a Docker container which includes a number of tasks to extract data from different security tools. There is a contrast task within this connector which can be run to extract custom code or library vulnerabilities from Contrast. This data can then be synchronized into Kenna's VM or AppSec modules. The connector is available via Docker Hub and it's documented within Kenna's GitHub repository, and you'll need to have Docker installed in order to run this container. If we browse to Tasks, Connectors, then Contrast, we'll see the documentation for the Contrast task. In order to run the connector, you'll need your Contrast API user keys. You can find these in the User Settings menu. I'm going to set these up first and then return to the optional parameters. Okay, so I've set up a script here to run the integration for me. The base of the script is actually in the documentation. If I just come across here, you can see the example call, so you can always start with that. I then provided my Contrast credentials. So I've added these as environment variables for my API key and API token, but you can just put these in line if you wish to. There are some details that you will require from the Kenna side. So there's a Kenna API key. You can find that actually quite easily in the top right hand menu. You see API keys from Kenna. And then you will also have to specify your API host. You may know this already, but typically you would take your normal Kenna domain, substitute the first part of the domain for API, and this is our correct place to go posting data. And then lastly, you'll need a connector ID. Again, quite simple to get this. Come to the connectors page, add a connector, specify the Kenna Data Importer, give it a name. I would recommend Contrast. And there's an asset inactivity limit here. So basically, if an asset or an application hasn't been seen within a number of days, it's archived within Kenna. So I'm going to set mine to 30 days. Hit save. And then if I click on that connector, it gives me a connector ID. So this is what I need. I'm going to come back into my script and then just add it here. There are also some optional parameters that you can add into this task. So I'm going to go to the documentation to look at these. The chances are that you might not want to send every single vulnerability that you have within Contrast SS or OSS across to Kenna. So there are a number of settings that you can use to filter the data that's being sent across. The first one that I'm going to use here is Contrast application tags. This allows us to only send applications which are tagged. I'm going to specify that I only want to send applications that include the IFA tag. You can also specify that you only want to send vulnerabilities from certain environments. For example, you might not want to include things from development, just QA or production, so you can specify that if you wish. You can also limit vulnerabilities based on their severity. I'm going to choose this option here. And this is a comma-separated list of values, so let's put in critical and high. And then lastly, there are a couple of settings worth pointing out. So the first is whether you want to include vulnerabilities from Contrast Assess. The default is true, so I'm going to leave that there. And then there's another setting to control whether you want to send libraries across to Kenna, or essentially CVE data. This is defaulting to false, so I'm going to set that to true as well. Okay, so that's it. Let's go ahead and run this script. For every application in Contrast, you should see an asset get created within Kenna. Alongside that asset will be the tags copied across from Contrast with additional tags for language and importance. By default, when you view vulnerabilities in Kenna, they're grouped by CWE code. So here we have CWE 89 for SQL injection, and then if we drill down into this record, we'll see a number of individual instances of this type of vulnerability within the application. The view is very similar to what you'd see within Contrast. That concludes this video. Please don't hesitate to contact our customer success team if you would like help setting up this integration.